Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a classic Northern Rhone Syrah. This is Hermitage from Domaine du Colombier, and this is their 2019 from a magnum. Now the Viale family first planted their vines in Hermitage in 1929. They have a 1.6 hectare plot on the west side of the hillside there, so they have 1.6 hectares of the 130 odd hectares, and their holding is in something called the Beaumes portion of Hermitage. Despite planting their vines in 1929, they didn't actually start releasing wines in their own name until the early 1990s. Up until 1992 they'd sold all their wines through négociants, so a neighbour of theirs is Guigal. Guigal had been their principal customer. That wasn't, up until about that stage, quite normal for small domains in this region. Today the estate is run by brothers Florent and David. They also have about 10 hectares of vines in Crozes-Hermitage, and they make both red and white of both those appellations, Hermitage and Crozes-Hermitage. Not surprisingly, the vines in the Beaumes plot that they have an average age in excess of 50 years. So you've got wonderful old vines giving fantastically concentrated fruit from this brilliant site. Domaine du Colombier's Hermitage is entirely Syrah. It's all hand-picked. Fermentation goes on in a range of tanks. They have stainless steel tanks, they have cement tanks, and they have wooden cuves. And maturation is done in such a way as to try and retain as much of the beautiful fruit that they've managed to get into the wine into the bottle for the consumer. So the wine will age for 8 months, and half of that will age in cement tanks, and the other half ages in large French oak demi-muid barrels, so 600 litre barrels, a high proportion of which are seasoned old oak. So you're getting a certain amount of oxidative influence from the barrel, but that's most of the influence. You aren't getting a lot of oak flavour coming through as a result of that. 2019 was a relatively hot summer and gave very concentrated fruits. There was, however, some poor weather in June which had affected yields, but generally cooler autumn weather ensured that the grapes, although they were ripe, had good acidity and they didn't reach a stage of over-ripeness. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? There's a really spectacularly deep dark colour there. That's completely opaque. There is a black ruby colour. There's a hint of purple at the rim, but actually the intense sort of blackish red colour keeps its intensity pretty much to the rim. As I swirl it, the wine is forming quite obvious legs on the glass. That can be accounted for in the fact that the label says this has 14.2% alcohol, and the colour of the wine is actually staining the glass ever so slightly. So there's a good intensity there, certainly. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are very rich. There's a real ripeness there. There is a sort of a rich black cherry, black plum note, quite heady. There are meaty touches and there are hints of spice. The meat almost a sort of a high-toned smoky bacon note at the top there, very delicately so, sort of actually more bacon fat than necessarily smoky bacon. And there is that lifted dusting of pepper across the top of the aromas there. The concentrated fruit, black to red, sort of becoming a sort of a more concentrated reddish, red cherry, red plum sort of note on the middle there. So let's have a taste. Tasting that's savoury, it's meaty, it's peppery. There's actually some nice freshness to the acidity, but there really is this sort of savoury, bloody meat note at the front of the palate. Now behind that, there's a lovely concentrated, almost purple red fruit. There's mulberry notes in there, going through to sort of loganberry, that sort of red to black sort of fruit there. Very ripe cherry. Now there's a concentration, the tannins there are giving this quite a sort of tight mid-palate. There's a bitter licorice note, there's perhaps hints of graphite as well, and there's good grip on the mid-palate. It's reasonable length, but the finish is structured. It's got spiciness. There are those savoury, meaty notes again. I suppose there are hints of black olive there. There are those notes of bacon fat. And yes, of course, everything has a dusting of black pepper, really. It's quite intense. The wine lasts reasonably well. Now, I recently tried the 2020, which actually come from a bottle, so was slightly more open than this. And I think 2020 is perhaps slightly more of an open vintage. It didn't quite have the alcohol that this has. There almost is in that finish there a hint of raisin, so perhaps there were some slightly overripe grapes ending up in this. But the concentration, the weight, the reasonable freshness, so certainly we saw that on the attack. It's not quite so obvious on the finish, but at the same time the alcohol isn't taking over. So I mean, the fruit has enough freshness that it can dominate the back palate to the finish there. The wine is medium to full bodied, certainly. It lasts well. It's got grip, but the tannins have a lovely suppleness and a ripeness to them. The grip is provided by some fine grainy notes on the tannins, and as I say, that runs on into the finish. So yes, I think a wine that in a magnum bottle at any rate is starting to open and show that it's and is starting to drink now. In an ordinary sized bottle, I would imagine it'd be a little further advanced than this. I think this would be lovely over the next 5 or 6 years. Could probably be kept for 10, 15 years or longer. But it's showing a superb fruit intensity and some lovely classic Syrah spicy notes. So I don't think it's necessarily a wine that will require very long aging, because this is at a stage where I think it will soon be drinking beautifully. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, please press the like button below. If you have any friends you think would be interested in watching the video, do please share it with them. If you have any comments, please leave your feedback in the comments box below. In the notes there, you'll also find a link to the Wine Searcher website, which will tell you where you can buy this wine, what its price is, and there are further notes such as price history and things like that that might be of interest to you. But most importantly, do please try and find the time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.